Who wants to kick it off?
Wait,
Alex, since you
yeah,
you brought the topic, you can introduce the topic.
Sure.
Do you want me to MC it, or do you want to jump in?
I could just jump in. So the topic for today was 3 things that I wish I knew before getting into enterprise SEO. So this could range from anything from skills and things that you've kind of learned while in a role, or things from like outside of it, saying like, from prior to being in an enterprise SEO, these are some things that I wish I had, picked up or learned about or something like that. So I've got kind of 2 sets of 3, depending on which direction we take it. But I was kind of thinking that we could just go around, just do one each. And then once you say your one, we'll discuss it for a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next person and just kind of keep going around. So that sound good to you guys?
Absolutely. Go ahead. You
that
start.
sounds amazing.
Okay. First one that I was going to pick was basically from kind of inside a role, and it's probably one that you guys are going to pick too, but internal networking. I really underestimated how much internal networking was significant and really made basically anything happen. One of the big things I think is, just from my background, agencies and freelancing, is there was always a point of contact in between me and the client. So there was some kind of, client success manager, or, you name the phrase, or salesperson or project manager or something, who basically played that card, who was the one who was the personal connections, who kind of made everything kind of flow during meetings and all that kind of stuff. And then for me, I was just the technical know-how guy who, was told by the PM, hey, and now Alex is going to say something.
Don't you love that in the client meetings? It's like, establish the relationship. Alex talks now.
Exactly. Bullet point 1, talk, be jovial and have fun. Bullet point 2, Alex does something boring. Bullet point 3, try to make it not so boring. Bullet point 4,
smile, smile, smile. Yeah.
Exactly. But that was pretty largely true. From SEO, you're such a technical know-how kind of individual, and you're such a specialist. Generally speaking, you're not really in a big team or something like that. You're kind of a solo operator or a small team operator. Once you're inside that organization, you've really got to make those relationships and get to know who does what, and their job title doesn't always line up to what they really do. And, sometimes there's 5 people with the same title, and one of them is the one who's in charge of domain names or something.
Well, and it occurs to me too that what you guys just described about sort of that building relationships, but then you've also got the sort of tech person in the room who's maybe dulling the mood, so to speak. That's what we do with IT all the time.
Yep.
We get to be the translator to say, okay, this is what this guy's saying we can and we can't do, and here's how we need to work with that, and then translate that to everyone in the organization.
Yeah.
Although it's never really a good feeling when you're the guy in Office Space that goes, I take the sheets from this team and I go to that team. I have people skills.
Yeah, that's basically my number 1 bullet point for my 3 is have people skills, damn it.
Exactly.
That's basically.
That's right.
Actually,
Yeah. Well, that was my number 1 was change management, which is related. You need the internal networking.
Totally. Change management, just to kind of add to that a little bit. So organizational change management, OCM, a little bit different than just change management. Super difficult because every little team inside of a company always has their priorities, and you're trying to basically tell them to not do that, instead do what you want to do. Right. And we're building off of that, kind of like, yes, you need the relationships, but then, yeah, absolutely, you need to kind of have a plan in place of how are we actually going to do this, and how are we actually going to convince people to do this, and who do we actually need to convince? Those are really tough questions for any project. Yeah. Internal SEO, you're always hitting that. So, Ruthi, that's a really good one.
And there's a lot of political bargaining that goes on, right?
Oh, totally.
You've got all the projects you want to work on, and we need this project, and so we're going to trade, right?
Yep.
Yeah, get some good public choice there going on.
Yeah, we won't get 100% of what we want, but if we can get to like above 60, we'll call it good. which,
Right.
you know, is such a depressing number in terms of a ratio, but it, you know, it's just the way it is for sure. My first one is very similar to what you guys said before. I think coming into a large organization, you know, the first one, and coming up with recommendations, I really underestimated how the organizational is actually structured internally. Right. So, I mean, it's not just the change management, it's not just the whatever, but actually the hierarchy of, you know, is the organization actually set up via its structures and command and controls and all of that to support this activity. Right.
In terms of, do they have the right kind of skills, or you mean there's like
Well,
the right kind of leadership?
skills, leadership, you know, like we talked about the political bargaining and whatever else, but like if you have a particular leader that views search as more of an IT activity because they've only come, or, you know, they've only ever heard of it because through the back end, or like page
Sure.
speed or JavaScript or something scary, then it's like immediately dismissed, right? Because you're not printing cash for the organization. So,
Yep.
you know, no. But if you, you know, actually take a nuanced view and you actually look at your data, you'll find that it's doing wonders for you, right? But if you have a culture where people are bought in digitally, they're bought into the fact that you look at every industry benchmark, and, you know, organic search, paid search are main drivers every year when institutions like Salesforce or, you know, Social Media Marketing Examiner or any of those, you know, organizations that do annual studies, it always plays a significant role in their marketing budgets. But, you know, if you don't have the support structures there, like an IT person who knows a little bit of marketing to say yes to it, the marketing people who know a little bit about the technology side to be able to speak to one another to do it, right? To have the culture of bought in. If you only have a culture of sales or old school analog marketing, then it's a much tougher lift, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, it occurs to me one of the symptoms of that. People are very excited about SEO. They always are. But they don't know, and they don't necessarily have the culture. And so you get one of those strange circumstances where you have higher up management talking about canonicals and how we have to fix the canonicals with no idea what a canonical is. And when you start hearing those buzzwords, that's a good clue of like, we're missing a piece here. We have the excitement, but we don't have the infrastructure.
I'm always reminded of like, it's when lead singers, you know, they're doing a show and somebody hands them a slip of paper and they say some phrase in the language of the country they're in, and it turns out to be like some horrible phrase that they shouted loud and proud from the stage. It's like, that's how I feel. You know, sometimes when you know, the execs are throwing around these technical terms, again, unless it's, you know, normal for the organizational culture, it's always kind of cringeworthy, just because you're afraid of what's going to happen next.
Oh my gosh. That just really reminded me. There's a show I once went to. It was in Maplewood, a suburb of St. Paul, right? And people really identify as being East Siders or, you know, St. Paul. And the singer's like, "Hello, Minneapolis." And everybody just looks at each other like, what? It was just dead silent. A whole bunch of people just staring at each other. Like,
know your audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure on the T-shirt it said Minneapolis as a, you know, tour stop, but no, and you're off far enough to make people kind of alienate them. So it was a rough start to a show.
That's true, though. I mean, that fits across all the networking, the change management. Yeah. If we're sending the wrong message, you're dead in the water. How many presentations do we create for a bajillion different groups with all a slightly different version because they had totally different knowledge sets, skill sets, and the things they cared about?
Absolutely.
It was interesting. I was listening to the Search Off the Record podcast, you know, the Google relations team. And they were talking about leveling up some kind of, bug. I think I shared the podcast with you guys, but internally, whoever it was leveled up some bug about the sitemap being too big. And the internal developers of Google was, decrease the level of importance on the ticket because, it seems to be working. So that's just not going to be a priority. It's like, come on, you wrote the rule book. You are literally writing the rule book that all of us have to follow. And you have the same problems we all do. Like, on the one hand, that's really comforting to know that, everybody has similar problems, when you're doing enterprise stuff. But it's also a little disappointing that, not even Google can get a dev, ticketing thing to work. But anyway.
Yeah.
All right, hard transition. Alex, what's your number 2?
Sure. Yeah, I got 2 that go in kind of different directions. One that I wanted to add in today was an internal champion. So this is something you can either ask about during an interview process when you kind of get to the hiring manager stage of saying, what does senior leadership think of SEO? And if you can get a good answer from that of the VPs are all bought into digital marketing, and we've got one CMO who's our boss's boss, and they're the one who grew this entire department, and they're kind of making waves or something. That's a fantastic answer.
Right.
If you get a fly by the night, we've got one guy who kind of is pushing it, or one person who's kind of pushing it, that's a little more hesitancy. I know a couple organizations that have gone through some massive transitions because there was one VP, one EVP, one CMO, one person who basically built up digital marketing and then left the company after things basically stalled out. And then everybody underneath of them either got laid off or job change, or basically the priority of the projects got shut down to nothing. So they're just working on kind of pointless work. Mm-hmm. Like that internal champion at a high level is so important. And if you're coming again from that agency or freelance world, you're used to the client already being sold by the time you show up as an SEO, or you're maybe a part of the first sales call, but somebody was interested and already is looking for you, is already looking for your talent. That's a whole different situation than an internal enterprise SEO role where you need that person to be that champion who is sold and bought in and who is like the evangelist, or you have to become that person. That's the hard other alternative.
Right. And depending on how they phrase the role, you very well may be what they're looking for, to be that. So that is definitely a follow-up question in that interview for sure. Say, wait a second. So am I going to have to be the guy who, is martyred for, SEO in this organization?
And is it one guy? Do I just get to be the guy who goes around talking about SEO by myself?
Right.
Yep. Trying to hope that your education method or your communication method is just the perfect one for that person.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Actually, so speaking of that, one of my other ones is related to that, and that's just like that. I didn't think of the tenure of people in their roles as much, right? Because of, we know with the benchmark stuff, any kind of like content play is going to be 18 to 24 months, right? If you do it really well, unless you buy an organization or buy a media property or something, right? Yeah. But the average tenure of most marketers in a role is 2-3 years. So if you're coming in to that internal champion who's already 18 months into their new role,
right?
Do you have the actual runway to implement these things, to try these things, or are you going to spend all of your political capital, doing other things?
That's an excellent point. There's a study that just came out talking about how CMOs are the shortest tenure of the C-suite. Mm-hmm. They switch all the time, and marketing gets thrown under the bus a lot, or it's seen as an unnecessary extra cost when you already have, long-term contracts or repeat contracts, annual, signups and stuff like that already working. You're just filling the new pipeline. So it's seems expendable, even though, of course, it's a terrible idea to think of it that way. Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, if you don't have that timeline, especially with how slow SEO can take, I think that kind of plays across a number of the things that we've already talked about already. I mean, we've talked about internal networking. We talked about having those kind of understanding the organization and who the teams are, and about that change management. All of that takes time. And as an enterprise SEO, you're starting at the day zero. If it takes you 90 days to get to know the team, that there's an excellent book out there that's called The First 90 Days. Fantastic. I recommend it for anybody, even if you're already in a role. It kind of restarts you on what you need to be doing and kind of moves things along. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that runway can be, by the time the project launches, it might be 6 months in. It could be actually a really, really short period of time that you have to suddenly try to pull this whole thing off before the quarter ends, or the champion moves, or your boss switches directions, or an acquisition happens and it takes over priority.
Which I think that just emphasizes the importance of quick wins, right? If you can get quick wins, the organization, sometimes it can work in your favor, right? The organization is moving so slow that by the time you get a chance to talk about your quick wins, some of the SEO value has started to actually show up, right?
Right. Yeah, that was one of my next ones, actually.
There we go. Nice segue.
Is long-term success and short-term excitement. So as an SEO, you always have a focus kind of on a longer-term scale. But if you kind of look at your past year's analytics, last couple of years, try to figure out kind of what the average increase or decrease is, and kind of plot yourself out for a couple of years and say, okay, this is my internal benchmark. I'm not going to tell my boss this, but internally, I really want to beat this number. If we have any increase at all, I'm going to tell my boss, hey, we got an increase, even though, we've been moving up 5% every year or 10% every year. You always want that 12%, something to kind of prove yourself you created an uptick. But again, that length of time, you're absolutely right. I mean, the short-term excitement, the shiny ball syndrome, you get that spotlight on you, your projects get along and moved along, even if people don't understand what the word canonical means.
Right.
Yeah. Dave, what's your next one?
What was it? Actually, let's go with Ruthi, because I did the 10-year, but I'm going to see what she says for my third.
Okay.
Oh, look, going into first enterprise SEO role, had no sense of scale. None whatsoever. I had been working on sort of small websites, maybe a handful of domains, maybe a dozen at most. Okay, this is easy. This is fine. And you get into an enterprise SEO role, and the scale, just sometimes you even have to uncover how many domains there are, let alone how many pages there are within each domain. And then you start, multiplying that by the number of countries and things. I think I was in for sort of quite a shock the first role I had. That was definitely the eye opener. And then to figure out, okay, let's say we optimize this one site. Good for you. Now you've got every other language around the world. How are you going to go about those? Totally different teams, totally different groups, different languages sometimes.
With
do you
all
have
the
a system
same...
that allows it to cascade, or do you have to individually update every single one? At which point, which are the ones that are going to be most valuable to focus on?
And all of your regions, all of your countries, or however your company is set up, have all the same organizational issues that we touched on first.
Yep. Oh, and they might not have the same tools. Surprise.
Which that's a great conversation, like internally though, to have like with your management of, I've got this giant list. What's the priority? Like you said it for me. If you're the one who's going to be judging my success, what do you want me to work on and what do you want to focus on? I think that it becomes overwhelming so fast, especially when you just start crawling and start seeing data come in, or the analytics data, which is just like messy as all can get out, or just massive. That's really hard to work with.
Yeah.
We're all reliving some PTSD here.
Yeah, a little bit. Actually, there's another one kind of based off of that of scale. Kind of Dave, to your point of the roles. That was another one that was kind of a shock to me of the job responsibility splits. And what I mean by that is small organization, you might have one person in charge of the website and that's it. They do the edits, the development, the approvals, whatever. Or maybe there's one person above them or a small team. Okay. One graphic designer maybe or not. And then instead, big organization, it's, this person, they work on this part of the header. This person works on this part of the footer.
Yeah.
This person works on the drop downs that are in the header. It's like, my gosh, how many people is this that I need to make one edit?
And the last time they spoke with one another was a retreat 12 weeks ago or 12 years ago.
Right. Right. And sometimes it's teams.
Yeah.
Works on the headers.
Right. And you have to convince each one of them who has their own ideas on how things should roll. I think that's
and they're still injecting content.
And there's that one person who just will not die in Flash. It will come back. Flash will come back. No, stop trying. You mentioned about like the IT kind of like in terms of like the sitemap problem that Google had. I think that's one of the things that I commonly overlook is when I'm asking a developer to edit a page, really what I'm asking them to do is redo their work and I'm critiquing their work. Yep. And no one likes that. And to ask them to go back to something that technically loads, it technically works, technically, you can click around on it, but it just takes 4.5 minutes to load, which is my problem that I'm trying to ask them to fix. Mm-hmm. I'm asking them to revisit work and take that as the priority for them. That's pretty awful. I mean, I don't think I give that enough credit for what I'm really asking when I ask for those edits.
Well, and on top of that too, you're always doing 16 requests at any given time, right? So it's like churn out the requests. So you're not necessarily thinking about their feelings, to your point when you're doing it. It's just like, hey, change this. This is broken. You need to fix it. Well, okay.
Well, and I think there's that approach of like, here, fix this one thing. It's broken. Versus some of the successful things I've seen as well working with dev teams is to say, hey, here's the tools that allow us to see what the Googles are seeing, right? Mm-hmm. Here's what they're seeing. Here's how your page looks to a bot. And then you have the eye opener of, easy fix, or I know how to solve that, which is a totally different mindset than that's wrong, fix that, or that's crappy, go and fix it. It all of a sudden empowers the dev teams to go, okay, all right, now we can look at this and we can work with this differently.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. Because along those lines, so one of my go-to ones for this when I was brainstorming on your topic idea, Alex, was the idea of narrative, right? I've always been the content guy. But I will say the practice of editing other people's work came in handy with my writing degree, because you knew that whatever you put on the page, you would have to sit around a table on Thursday, while they read the critique and everybody discusses the story, or discusses the poem on how, whether it was good, where it fell flat. You flex those muscles real quick in terms of, how do you say something nicely, and honestly, not just like, hey, this is crap, but you're not reaching your potential yet, right? Do a couple more drafts, figure this is what's coming across as the point of this particular work. And in order to do that, here's what I recommend doing.
I'm laughing to myself because of all the emails I sent back to Dave that were just basically red pens throughout. He's like, no. Rewrite this here.
Yes. The economist and the artist. That's the difference. There's no utility in feelings. What are you doing?
The Midwestern in me just cringes every time I have to do that. I had a direct report once, and he wrote this kind of SharePoint page. And honestly, his thoughts and his ideas were spot on. The writing was atrocious. And I was basically, as a Midwesterner, I used the Hemingway app, and I was like, you need it to just pass through the Hemingway app, and then I'll approve it. It's not me, it's the app. It's the app.
Get rid of the red.
Yeah, never got it back. Never was sent back a second draft. Definitely a skill I need to work on.
Yeah. Well, but so with that, I think one of the things that I have seen a lot of SEOs, and even a lot of marketers more generally struggle with, is what is the story you're telling, right? Like, it's one thing to collect all the data and to have all the data, which always seems to be an enterprise focus, is we have this data lake. In fact, it's so much data, we have to call it a lake because we flooded the shed that we had, to house all the things. And so, but it doesn't matter really, because as soon as you have that data, you are going to make it sing, depending on how good your culture is to, whatever political things you have to, or whatever boss you're presenting to. Like, on the most altruistic side, you'll be doing good work and you'll hit your 12% growth, year over year. And, you did it through good means. But if you do some creative accounting because you have a crap culture,
you can torture it into singing.
Exactly. You can make it scream instead of sing. But it's about the, hey, we did this organizational change management. We got this increased productivity. We're able to do, we can stop cutting headcount because we can see these, improvements. And we know where we need more people, because if we want to, squeeze this for all the juice that's available, we need to have more people in these roles, or in this particular priority country, right? Crafting the narrative to align it to the business goals, and not just to have, I'm the marketer, I got more traffic, yay. Or God forbid you're in the unfortunate position to say, I fixed 50,000 errors last quarter. And
right. Golf clap.
Exactly.
I think that's huge too, because you can fix all the pages you want, or even have all the pages you want, but if at the end of the day they're not aligned to what the organization is trying to do,
that's that.
You might be better off showing up at a conference and shaking people's hands, like just being part of the sales. Like, what value are you adding to this that couldn't already be added throughout the rest of the organization?
And that for me at least is where, like, as much as I love listening to a lot of the search content that's out there, there's a lot of really smart people tackling some really hard problems. But we are a very insular group of people. We like to talk about the technical things, and we found a problem and we fixed it, rather than I think back to when JavaScript became a first thing, right? Where it's like, well, they seem to be developing it and we know it goes against best practice, but we can't convince them to stop. So I guess we'll just put up with it. Right. And there are better ways of handling that, in retrospect. And I think we can provide more value as experts, as specialists, or even as a damn good marketer who knows multitudes of practices, right? Because at least in my mind, it's a craft more than it is particular specialization. So anyway, I'm rambling. I lost my point a while ago, so I'll stop.
Well, there's to kind of work off of that. There's kind of the big picture, little picture mentality of trying to understand that big picture, the little picture, and then trying to tie the two together I'm trying to make that impactful presentation by wrangling that data, which is all about the little picture, to try to somehow make a big picture statement out of it. That's a skill, and that can be a difficult skill. I was going to do a bonus fourth one. Just this took a while in an organization to understand it, the importance of it, which is the marketing sales relationship. A lot of enterprise SEO, especially by volume, you're really working on top of funnel, fill the sales pipeline kind of activities. But where does it go from there? And does it actually hand off at some point to somebody in sales? Or is it e-commerce click and you got a buy button, and maybe it's customer service that is getting pinged like crazy because what your terms are showing up for isn't quite what the product does, or something, there's a mismatch or description errors, or who knows, size problems and stuff like that, which I've definitely seen on sites where the increments that were used were entirely off. So if you bought it based upon the web page, that's not actually what you receive. Like little things like that, which are big.
To that point, I've had one particular project where we did amazing work. We had a lot of zeros behind the outcome, but then we found that we only had a half-time salesperson on it.
Yeah.
So all of the leads that we had in the CRM just did not matter because we didn't have anybody to call on any of them. So all the leads just rotted.
Yeah. Or on the flip side, some of the better projects that I've worked on were situations in which, we didn't have all the big numbers, but the infrastructure was set up in a good way so that anything we were doing was ultimately successful, such that we could scale down the road. But if you don't start with that connection first, you're going to have a lot of leads and nothing to do on the back end.
No. Well, just also that language, like the more you can understand from the sales, like the profit side of it, basically, the better you can position your SEO activity, your tool purchase, your request for sitemap edit. You can use the right language of saying, we convert at a 3% rate from organic search. I think that if we change this, it could definitely increase the size of our pipeline by a bit. But 3% of that is going to be sales. So anything that helps, suddenly that becomes a lot more important sitemap edit request. Or what kind of language you use about, Dave, we had a prior chat once and you're talking about commodity products. And then there's kind of like the long-term sales, interpersonal relationship kind of built products, which are the kind of those big ticket items or really complex purchase deals between two organizations, especially B2B stuff. Those ones are so different. And a commodity purchase versus one of those handoff to maybe an ABM kind of style campaign, or maybe go straight into a salesperson's kind of queue to follow up on or work off of. That's such a different situation. And if you're talking about one versus the other, or you're used to an organization that does one versus the other, you really got to relearn it and figure out what this organization does.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and to your point earlier of the change management and finding out where the org is going, so many of the old school businesses that you find in, the DAO or, which kind of works I'm talking about. The transition to a direct to consumer model from a traditional B2B model, generally, that is a really painful thing because you have all of this workforce that's stuck using, not stuck, but are more familiar using channel partners, the relationships, the handshakes that they've established for years and years and years. There's the whole legal side of things you have to talk about as well. With your contracts, because I was explaining to a guy the other day, when you go from doing sort of a traditional relationship marketing thing into online, all of a sudden everybody becomes a frenemy, right? You might have a really good relationship with so-and-so at competitor X, but when you're trying to rank for the same keyword that drives 80% of your revenue, I don't care how nice they are or how good the lasagna is their wife makes when you have dinner with them. Like, forget it. You're going to try to take them down. Yeah. So it is a different mindset for sure.
Yeah. And then even deep into the sales piece, if you really get to know the actual sales team and individuals, there's a pretty big difference between pipeline volume, kind of an argument, versus kind of an account-based management, single kind of high-profile client win.
Yeah.
Because they might be looking at, and there's some organizations that they get this one fourth quarter, very last kind of Hail Mary kind of sale, and that makes their entire year. So they don't care about basically 364 days. They care about that one last final day who finally made it and they finally got the signature done because there was the big whale of a client that they cared about, which is tough from the SEO standpoint because a lot of the stuff we're really talking about is pipeline volume and filling up that top of that pipeline to bring down that marketing funnel and think about it in that picture. You fill the top, you get the bottom. The bottom is this consistent flow of new client information or contact form fills or webinar signups or whatever the heck you're actually kind of pushing for. That's such a different argument to sales, saying that we're going to give you 5, 15 leads, 50 leads, 100 leads a day. They don't care. They want one. This one per guy.
I remember a couple of conversations about that particular situation where the purpose of your site and what you're doing with SEO is completely different in those circumstances. You're not filling the pipeline. That's not what you're doing. You're there so that when after somebody talks to the sales guy, they go Google, they go find out more information. You're there with a fantastic experience. You're reaffirming with the sales and you're providing confidence. It's yes, you should trust us, or yes, you should re-enlist, or you should re-sign your contract because we're still the best and we're here for you, regardless of whether it's you calling the salesperson or you searching online looking for information. We've got it for you. We have the answer.
Yeah. Kind of moving back, Ruthi, to your point about change management. There's almost a version of that that's within just marketing and sales. That's almost always present whenever you have a traditional sales organization kind of added into your overall client or your org that you're with. There's always some kind of push and pull between the two because both of them are always trying to look for budget and both of them are always claiming the same sales and profit as their win.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to create some tension. We're like, yeah, we did this. And we're like, well, yeah, but they also flew out there 6 times and it almost went south. And then finally got a VP signature last minute to approve a change. Kind of was yours, kind of wasn't.
Right.
Yeah, that brings it back full circle. I think that it's actually a nice way to wrap up because it is, everything is just so interconnected, and that was my takeaway of when I first started at my first big org, walking the hallways and realizing that the population of the workforce was about the same as my the town I grew up in. I'm just like, oh my God, I'm working for the local government. That's my role here. I'm like the wastewater guy.
When you see like floors of just cubicle walls and you're like, my gosh.
Yeah. So figuring out how to navigate that, coming up with creative solutions that actually drive the impact and doing, any number of buzzwordy sentence structures, in order to have the day job. But as always, I think I've enjoyed our conversation together. And I think if you guys don't have any final words, we can say adieu and see everybody in the next episode.
That was good.
Cheers.
Bye, everybody.
Awesome. Take care.